Thank you. It's a pleasure to address you. I've never been in Vietnam. The closest I've got to Vietnam is Thailand, which is still some distance from Vietnam. Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist who ended up, a Jewish psychiatrist, who ended up at Auschwitz, a concentration camp in Germany during the Second World War. And in that camp, everything was stripped from them, all their possessions, all their clothes. They had nothing that they could call their own. And he noticed that many of the people that came there just gave up hope. They curled up in their beds. Some of them died from the rough treatment of the guards, but others died simply because they saw no future for their life at all. His parents died in the concentration camps. Later on, he discovered that his wife died. Most of his relatives died. But what kept him going was the thought of something greater than the concentration camp. And he realized that while the Germans could take his possessions, while the Germans could take his clothes, there was one thing they could not take away from him, and that was his dignity. They could not take away his mind. They could not take away his choices. They could not take away how he would think. And all of us can choose how we think. If you're happy, it's because you have chosen to be happy. If you're miserable, it's because you have chosen to be miserable. No one can make you miserable unless you allow them to. That's the power of your thinking. And so Viktor Frankl began to think about his wife, who he loved very dearly. And he hoped that one day they would be reunited. And he kept thinking about her and the purpose of his life. And the purpose was to love her and to serve her. And he survived the concentration camps. And he wrote a book, famous book, called Man's Search for Meaning. Over 9 million copies have been sold. He actually lived until 1997. Practiced psychiatry in his home country of Austria and also in the United States of America. He developed a concept called logotherapy. And in his concept of logotherapy, he said that in our search for meaning in life, we have to go outside of ourselves. That meaning is not just being successful in your career. It's not just earning as much money as you can earn and having as nice a house as you can earn. As he counseled with his patients, he taught them that they had to discover what was their purpose for living. And so the first question I want to ask you today as you graduate from this course is, do you know why you are here? No, not just to get your MBA, not just to tour the United States of America, but when you go back to your home country, do you know what you're really going to be doing there? Are you just going to be in a job, earn some money, marry, have a family, and then one day, die? Or do you have a fixed purpose, a greater meaning in life in how you're going to serve your country? Let me give you an example. Soon after Bangladesh gained its independence in 1971, Muhammad Yunus, who was an economics professor at Western State Tennessee University, went back to his home country to teach in that country. And Bangladesh was one of the poorest countries, if not at that time, the poorest country in the world. And he discovered that the banks wouldn't loan people any money because they didn't have any collateral, they didn't have any credit, they had no way of guaranteeing that they would pay back the loan. So he went to the small village of Yobra and discovered that one of the problems was a lot of people were in debt to the lenders, and they could never get out of debt. So he helped 42 people in that village get out of debt to the lenders, and it only cost him $27. Now, that was still a lot of money. I mean, it doesn't sound like anything today, and it still wasn't that much, but that was how little it took. And then he decided that he would start what is called microloans, less than $100, and discovered that women were the best bets for lending money to. And the whole purpose was that they would provide a business plan. They would tell him how they were going to use that money, how they were going to buy a sewing machine, for example, so they could make clothes, or whatever they wanted to use that money for. He then founded in 1977 the Grey Mean Bank, because none of the other banks still, they just poo-pooed his ideas and said, you can't make a difference at all. So he had to found his own bank. It became so successful that in 2006, he earned the Nobel Peace Prize for what he had done for his country. As I tell you the story, I'm not telling you this, I'm going to go back to Vietnam so I can earn a Nobel Peace Prize. He never did this because of any gratitude he was going to get from the world. He did it because he had a passion for his country. He had a passion to help the people out of poverty there. He said, borrowers don't fail. The bank does. And despite the gloom that the other banks said, the repayment to this date of people paying back their loans is 98.1%. Seems like the banks in this country should learn a lesson from what they're doing there with the mortgage crisis that has been going on. And the objective of the loans is not just to help them earn a living. They measure the success of that bank is not measured by how much money the bank makes, but how many people do they lift out of poverty? How many children go on to school and are educated? How many people pull themselves out of poverty? To date, 65% of all borrowers have risen above the Grayman Bank's own 10-point poverty line. Only 20% of Grayman members live below the poverty line, whereas 56% of non-members live below the poverty line. This averages out to 45% below poverty for all of Bangladesh. And as we said, the borrowers, 90% of whom are women, have to submit a business plan in order to receive money from this bank. And when someone dies, their debt dies with them. Their heirs do not have to pay back any of the money. Originally, loans were given for small businesses, but now have expanded to health, education, housing, transportation, and other purposes. They have now grown to 7.45 million borrowers at 2,499 branches in 81,334 villages, covering more than 90% of the total villages in